because she said that they couldn't have that total concept of atheism. I know, it's extremely difficult. I know. I mean, but you know, she's an expert in those areas, okay, and I'm not. So, but it's interesting because Berman has written a really interesting book, and I will be covering some of his ideas because he believes that there was atheism very early, and there are some thinkers now that have, but you know, we don't have enough data. We don't have, people were called atheists that just didn't believe in the virgin birth or scoffed at, you know, other concepts, the resurrection and what have you. And we don't have enough data, a lot of it. But we do have some things. I mean, we have things that, like, priests that are saying that they talk to people, you know, that were atheists and everything. But actually, atheists we don't have until, you know, the Enlightenment era. And you know, I have the dates in my lecture on atheist history.
I wonder if that, again, we have the social, the societal, and legal pressure not to have it known that you were an atheist.
Yeah, but they were burned a lot of times because they disputed, you know, certain tenets of Christianity.
Rather than saying, I don't believe in God,
right,
saying,
right.
I don't believe in the virgin birth.
This was
You're
enough.
dead.
Yeah, or resurrection, or And Marlowe and a lot of his friends, I mean, Marlowe might have been spying for the establishment because he would be called in regularly on, you know, because other people that they had brought in and tortured and what have you implicated him, and then they would question him, all of a sudden he'd be let loose, which is very odd because most people weren't allowed to leave, you know, when there's charges. But it looks like he was with a lot of friends who scoffed at a lot of tenets of Christianity. Was he an atheist? No way of knowing. It's really difficult.
But it's your position that existentialism could not have come about until after the Enlightenment?
You know, I'm not sure if it's my position or not. You know, I'm only going by experts, but it seems to me that, you know, as we approach the really death of God, like Nietzsche said, where it became more widespread. I mean, because atheism, if it was thought probably by more sophisticated thinkers, although I'm sure there were some ordinary people that just didn't believe and just didn't say anything. But I think that all these things had to come together. With this sense of alienation, maybe the extremity of industrialism in the cities.
But that strengthens the argument that existentialism is really something more than just, you know, thinking about man's meaning or man's purpose, that it has this post-God, that you can't be a Christian atheist, Christian existentialist, because you can't really believe in God and be an existentialist.
Yeah, except that there's a lot of them. I mean, not a lot of them, but they're formidable ones. Kierkegaard.
They used their religion. They thought that they could strengthen their religion.
Yeah.
But is that actually a valid, coherent point of view?
To me, it is not.
Doesn't seem very coherent.
No.
Also, I'm wondering about the role of war in the philosophers' thinking about existentialism, especially Camus and Sartre, because they were right in the middle of occupation by the Nazis.
They belong to the resistance, too.
And Heidegger, you know, was also right at the time of Hitler's peak. So don't you think that war and the death that was caused by war influenced these thinkers greatly?
Oh, I think you're right.
And I don't know what was going on in Germany in the time of Nietzsche, but I think that probably there was also some you know, wars. There were religious wars that had gone on for centuries. Yeah, and there were like all kinds of like little European wars, and then, you know, 7 years. So they I think it was just this trend to like modernity. And after World War I, there was is it the Lost Generation? Were they existentialists? Were they?
No, they were almost nihilists. Not quite. No, you know, actually, that's a good question, because I know you don't like Hemingway, and I do, very much. And but Hemingway had kind of, he can't be defined as an existentialist, but he had that. I always think of him as an existentialist, and I know I shouldn't, but he had that grace under fire. You know, you know, you have this ethos, and you'll live by it, and you'll know that you're going to be crushed by the world. You know that you're going to probably be killed.
And he killed himself.
Yeah, he did. He did. Well, you know, remember, he was in like really bad health, and I think he wasn't writing very well anymore, partly as a result of his physical problems. His father had killed himself. There's other members of the family that have since killed themselves, so there must be some kind of something running through. And I mean, I don't know. Or maybe, you know, some psychologists say that if your parent commits suicide, it kind of gives you permission to do it. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know what the statistics are on that. But yeah, I admire Hemingway because he believes in, like, you know, facing these things and living them and knowing that you'll probably be crushed. And like he says, like, if you're brave or good or whatever, you'll probably be crushed all that sooner by the world.
I think his suicide was not cowardly. I think
No.
it was
A choice.
Yeah, it was a choice,
I
yeah.
think suicide is more of a choice. Once again, it's a choice.
I'm sorry
Some
that we...
philosophers have said that it's it's the wrong choice. It's in bad faith. But I tend to disagree with it. I think there's a lot of people who have made a noble decision to do that.
Well, suicide was not that, you know, considered that bad until Christianity came along. I mean, the Romans regularly did it.
Out of honor or out of...
Yeah, it was part of their ethical system. Sometimes they did it, you know, like Seneca died very bravely, although people considered him a hypocrite. But part of the reason was if you came under displeasure by the emperor and you didn't kill yourself before you were tried and executed, they would confiscate your family's fortune. So a lot of them would do that so to save their family's, you know, property and what have you.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, a lot of people felt like when they came to the limits of their life, that maybe they were like ill and couldn't face anything, it was considered an honorable thing to do, you know. The Greeks didn't do it as much, but it wasn't disapproved, you know, as it became under the Christian thing. The Christian thing was you were going to go to hell, you know, and you couldn't even be buried, remember, in hallowed ground if you committed suicide. So there was a big change.
Well, yeah, the Jews had that same idea.
See?
That it was a shame and that it was that's God's domain. God's domain decides when you die.
Yeah.
Not, you do not decide, which again is an existentialist point of view, is I decide, or does God decide?
There you go. Well, it's funny, I had a girlfriend, and in one of her suicide attempts, she ended up in the water, and the policeman that fished her out, the first words that he said to her, "Don't you know this is against the law?"
Young say you're breaking the law.
No, I think he was serious.
He was serious. That wasn't a joke, he was serious.
Or she thought he was, I guess.
He knows all the codes, see, they follow the codes.
I think he probably wasn't a very thoughtful.
No,
You
he
know,
was following the
person.
codes, it's in the book, page 17.
Hey lady, this is
Suicide
against the law. Yeah.
criminal offense.
You mentioned will to power is the internal struggle?
You know, this is interesting. This is what
yes.
people say about, you know, Nietzsche. I'm not altogether sure. I think sometimes it is the control, the mastery over the self. I think it really is in his works. You can see that. He talks about that a lot. That shifting self with all those desires. And he knows that it moves very, very quickly. We're not as complete as we think we are. That's, I think, what the postmodernists were very good at, you know, discussing. But there's that other sense, I think that he does see it as a will to power in the world, too.
Yeah, that's...
Well, people try to explain a lot of the objectionable things about Nietzsche away because they admire him so much.
Yeah, but I object to that kind of apologist thinking because, no, I think he really was talking about competition.
Yeah, sometimes.
Between people and what really motivates people, and that it wasn't money or comfort or even praise. but it was this will to power, to have power.
I'll agree with you, yeah, I'll agree with you there, but it was also self-mastery.
Also the
So it was
eternal
both.
struggle,
It was both.
power over yourself.
I think that's all I had about existentialism.
It's
but
just like when they
fascinating.
talk about jihad.
Yeah.
Which is it? Is it like the struggle against, the Christian enemy or whatever, the
Any enemy, doesn't have to
any
be
enemy,
Christian, Buddhist,
any enemy,
right.
or is it the self-control? And a lot of Islamic thinkers say it's the self-control. It's very difficult to interpret.
Yeah, but at least when I talk about the will to power or to competition, I'm not talking about killing people. I'm talking about gaining in society over your fellow man.
Right. Yeah. There's always that.
This idea that you will be able to have more power than your fellow neighbor will have.
Well, Nietzsche talks about it, that the nobles in this society were the guys that were able to overcome the weak and, grab up all the, the riches and the castles and everything like that. So I think you're right. I mean, but, it's a very unpopular point of view to put forth. And we have to remember that he also was talking about self-mastery. He talks about different things. This is a trouble. That's why I said that there's a different Nietzsche every minute.
Eight different threads in American.
Yeah, you can find whatever you want.
Yeah.
But even this article on Jewish existentialism, they say that Nietzsche was an anti-Semite. It's just
I know, they
repeats over
won't
and over
stop.
again.
They won't
Come
stop.
on,
And it's
that's
very
been
unfortunate.
disproven. So.
Don't need it. But you mentioned the assertive skeptics. It sounds like they were atheists.
Probably. It's really hard to tell because they were part of Plato's school. They were like directors of his academy. And Plato believed in these ideal forms.
Yeah.
And he and Socrates also had some kind of idea of a daemon. And so they really weren't atheists. So I don't know that these fellows were probably a real, what you would consider a real atheist.
Well,
Not coming from Plato's school.
What is the difference between assertive skepticism and non-assertive skepticism?
The one is where they argue their position, like nothing's known and they'll argue it. And the other is a Pyrrho's position where, nothing can be known, but, if you realize this, you'll become relaxed and tranquil in your life, and you don't carry it around and argue it with people.
More Buddhist thing.
Yeah, actually, yeah, it's like a more Buddhist thing. Although he had a good school of followers, but they weren't aggressive about it. They weren't heads of schools either.
And I'm told that Descartes' famous phrase is really should be translated, I doubt, therefore I am.
Well, cogito is like I think, really.
But there's something in the way that it was translated. Cogito is it the same? I think because I'm thinking about uncertainty.
Well, I think, yeah.
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Not the act of thinking, but I think. Having some doubt.
I think he was pretty sure that he thought. He's pretty sure that he thought.
But you mentioned that phrase in light of the skeptics and skepticism, that it had to do with his ability to doubt.
Yeah, but he also had to come to some solid ground somewhere, or at least he felt he had to.
Yeah, which was arbitrary.
Which the postmodernists didn't feel you had to do, but
right.
He really did. Well, because he wanted to really defeat atheism.